Hey 3DMJers, this is Andrea Valdez, and you're listening to the 3D Muscle Journey podcast. Today, I have the honor and privilege of informing you that this is the first episode featuring our new 3DMJ coach, Brian Miner. Brian has been a prominent figure in the evidence-based fitness space, on the pro bodybuilding stage, and the elite powerlifting platform for over a decade now. Earning his MS in Health and Exercise Science from Colorado State University, he's an intellectual at heart. But what really separates Coach Miner is his ability to take some of the seemingly more complicated ideas that are currently making rounds and makes them more user-friendly to the masses. It's these polished, soft skills that make Brian an amazing fit with our team's holistic athlete-first model, and we're honored to introduce him as the newest coach at 3DMJ. Today, you're going to hear him talking with Alberto Nunez and Brad Loomis, as these three gents have a nice long discussion about overcoming burnout and motivation plateaus. Please give Brian a nice warm welcome, listen to this podcast all the way through, and leave him tons of nice comments on this episode over on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/team3dmj.
All right, folks. So we tallied it up, and between everyone here, we have a total of 68 years of being in the trenches. It's quite a lot. And you do this long enough, you'll definitely run into those periods where you're not as motivated, not as in love with the process as you might have been during the majority of your training career. And it's weird. It's a hard place to navigate, but it's perfectly normal. You do something long enough, you will run into those bouts, those moments where it's a fight to just get in. And I'm not talking about like one training session, this week. I mean, like, you're just like in a chronic funk where it's like, man, the last month or so, I just haven't been really wanting to do the damn thing. So it's normal. We've all been through it. And today we're going to discuss, how we've managed to work around those moments, potentially how to minimize how often that happens. And just, I think above anything else, just share the fact that we've been there before, because it's going to make some of you realize that maybe you're going through one of those phases right now. It's going to make you realize that, oh, okay, this is normal. I'm not screwed. This happens to everyone, including the guys that have been training for 68 years all together, and I'd say between all of us, it's like we've been quite successful at what we do, but that doesn't mean we're immune to those moments. Brad, when was the last time you felt like I'm not with this right now?
Well, Bert, it's ironic that you asked that question of me, because I'm kind of there now in a way. Not anything severe, but I'm just a little bit burned out. I've run. Everybody knows that I'm the most boring guy in the world, and I've run the same program for like 40 weeks straight, and I'm just getting a little bit fried, and it's something where I don't. There's rare occasions when I don't want to train, and right now they're more often than not. I just don't feel like doing it, And then when I do get in there, sometimes I'm kind of dragging my ass through it a little bit. And it's not quite as much fun. It's not quite as much enjoyment. But, I can say with a fair amount of certainty that it's been at least 40 weeks since I've experienced this, right? Mm-hmm. But it's been a long time, since I've felt this way. I think one thing that is important is that I haven't had anything go wrong. It's one thing when you're tired of your program, you're burned out because something's gone wrong. You're either not progressing or you're fighting an injury. That's one thing. But it's altogether different when everything's fine, everything's going good, and just for whatever reason things are stale. Or, I think a couple years ago, Bert, you made a little video that said, "I don't love my training right now." So yeah, to answer your question in short, I'm kind of going through that right now.
When did this start for you, Brad?
Just recently.
Okay.
Just recently, like this last microcycle, it was really good. I started this microcycle of Tuesday of last week, and I still haven't finished it. And here we are Wednesday of this week, right? So, just here recently.
Okay. So it might not even last that long. Like, well, who knows? Maybe because you've been through this before. It's like, it's like, oh, I know what this wave is like. Mm-hmm. This might run a little bit longer than one might think. Is that the deal?
Yeah, for sure. Because I'll be honest with you, I tend to get a little bit run down when there's a lot happening with, the family, Mm-hmm. And it was the wife's birthday yesterday. She turned 50. I wanted to make it super special. I had all kinds of stuff planned. I was a little bit stressed out, and that's happened to me before in the past, like with other training blocks that I've run, when the kid was deep in football, and we were having to run him all over frickin' Northern California, it seemed like, sessions got kind of a bit laborious and they were getting hard to get to, So needless to say, my plan is to just stick with it, ride it out, and see what things are like in about, 2 weeks, which you guys are probably the same way. You probably kind of like to not make impulse decisions, and you kind of tend to tell your clients the same thing that I'm telling myself. Let's ride this for just a little bit, before we start making wholesale changes.
Yeah.
So is anything really changed? I know you said you keep things pretty simple and consistent, but in terms of structure, like, is there anything that you've done differently over this like mesocycle that's just not agreeing with you? Or is it like, can you identify why, outside of just external stressors, that maybe you're just not enjoying the training because of what you have programmed? Because I know that's sometimes the case with me.
Yeah, Brian, that's a good question. I would kind of have to think about it a little bit and maybe even look at my spreadsheets. But one thing that does prompt in my mind when you ask that question, because the way that I format my training, I add sets each week for 3 weeks, and then I recycle it back to the beginning. And so the third week is always the hardest. And most of the time, that's the week that I really like, because it's more sets, it's harder training than the previous 2 weeks. But with that being said, here with all the family happenings going on, I wanted to make sure that I got the first 2 weeks done before all of my events that I planned happened. And so they kind of got done a little bit quicker than they normally do. So you might have just helped me identify one of the things that changed right there, was that I did get those first 2 microcycles done. Usually it's, 14, 15, 16 days that I get the 2 microcycles done. This time it was probably like about 12, maybe 13 days. And then I started the hard microcycle that I'm in right now. And yeah, just the last couple sessions, it's just been like, oh man, let's just get in there and knock this shit out, and that's kind of what the sessions have kind of looked like too.
And this has been like after a successful block, right? So it was like you just had a really good training block, and this still popped up.
And yep, exactly. And my little shoulder injury that I was having, gone. I was able to get rid of that. Had a couple little knee aches, gone. They went away. So, and I was still progressing even with those. So, everything was going pretty good. So, thanks, Brian, for helping me identify that. Way to go, Coach.
Let's put him in the hot seat, though. Like, Brian, what share your story with us, man.
I've had it occur a number of times throughout my training career, and I think for most people, it's going to occur more the further you get into training, and I think some of that is just a byproduct of progress coming at a slower rate. Like it's always sort of a hard sell to tell someone, just starting out training, like as the years go by, it's going to be harder to train, and you're going to be doing more work. It's going to be less motivating, and you're going to, not only that, you're going to be getting significantly less return on your investment. You know, it's not on paper, it's a shit investment. You know, so it's like you want to look at it like through a very wide lens to really appreciate it. And I think when you get to that point, it becomes especially important to program in a way that you enjoy, first and foremost. For me, you know, and Berto, we've talked about this a bit, you and I, like after that 2017 prep, I think some of it was, you know, we sort of offloaded this big goal, this big milestone. I didn't really have anything down the pipeline, you know, in terms of competitions or, you know, powerlifting meets. And I haven't since then. But it took me, you know, probably 2018 and 2019, like I was still training, but the structure, I think for me, the burnout came from not having really an objective at the time. And that's not necessarily a good thing. Like you should be able to, you know, stay consistent and still enjoy your training in those periods of time. And I think for me, it made me sort of take a step back and realize, like, okay, we don't need to constantly be working, you know, towards a meet, towards a show. You know, it's okay to sort of put things on the back burner for a minute, you know, maintain for a little while, you know, take care of other priorities. And so that was kind of the biggest one for me. You know, this year things have been significantly better, like, you know, or even since then. I think when I've had it periodically since then, it's been more due to the fact, like, you know, I write my own training, and, you know, I try to write, I still catch myself for trying to write like the perfect block based off of, you know, my schedule. And you know, even then I tend to overestimate what I can accomplish within a week, you know, realistically. And, you know, even just yesterday, because I just started a new block and I was writing the training, and I thought, like, okay, rather than set myself up for feeling like I fell short of what's on a piece of paper, I'm just going to program myself less to do, you know, because like at least I can check the box knowing I accomplished what's there. And I think for me, psychologically, that's beneficial. You know, if I have time to do a little bit more, I will. But I know for me, when I over program, I can get burned out really quick, because it's just discouraging, because I don't end up getting to fit all of that stuff in. Even if I'm doing the same amount of work as I am doing now, with just less on that list, it's just a lot easier to maintain positive momentum when I, you know, have a manageable amount to accomplish.
Man, that was 2018 and 2019.
Yeah, I'd say probably half of 2019.
Okay.
2018, you know, Kelsey was pregnant, and, you know, 2019, Remy was, you know, my daughter, she was infant stages. So it was a good time to sort of pull back a little bit anyway. Mm-hmm. And it was about half of 2019. That was when, you know, at the end of 2018, Remy, daughter, was born, and it was a good time to sort of pull back a little bit then anyway. And I think just the nature of that prep, like it just emptied my tank, which was kind of the goal there.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to feel good about stepping away for a half decade plus if I wanted, not like itching to get back on stage like the next year. So, but yeah, since then it's been significantly better. I'm starting to get the itch to compete in, you know, a show or, you know, prep for a meet again. So that's good. So yeah, that's probably the most recent time it's been at its worst. And I was still getting in and training 3-4 times a week. But it was like I said before, I would write my training based off of what I wanted myself to do, and I just found I wasn't doing it all. And it was just, you sort of set yourself up for feeling like you fail when you do that. You know, it's like it's kind of like when you assign like firm numbers to macros for people and they're off by 5 and they feel like it's just wasted effort. Then, it's like that's
The
sort
end
of
of
what
the world,
it's like.
yeah.
If you just give them more flexibility out of the gate, like it's easier to feel like you're meeting the objective. And I think that residual, positive momentum is important. I know it is for me. So
Damn. No, I have a 2-year stint like that too, Brian. Man, right after my 2008 prep. And I will say this, like what you said, Brian, it's like, it just, after you do something, it's like you're kind of just like left there stranded after the goal is met, right? Which in part is a good thing, right? Because you realize like, oh, it was the process, it was the hunt, it was living that way, that was the majority of the excitement. And this is even after like things have gone like really well. At the end of the season, I'm like, well, okay, well, now what, right? You know what you're supposed to do, but you're just still kind of, you just like feel empty-handed. You feel like even though you got everything you wanted from whatever that goal was, it's just like, okay, you just learn that it's a normal thing. I think for me, it was like when I heard that, like, I think especially the niche sports, like in the Olympics, like once like they're done, it's like, no one cares about your sport no more. Like, you were invited to all these talk shows, and like now it's like no one recognized me at the supermarket. What's up with that? So there's a little bit of that always comes. But 2008 specifically, it's like, okay, had the best season I've ever had, but also I got hurt during that prep. So it was really hard for me to, especially this was when like I really started to build like a community of bodybuilders around me. This is when me and Eric were meeting up almost every weekend. Quite often Jeff and Brad would join as well. And it was hard to see everyone just have a fantastic time with their training. And like I'm over here with like this defensive model of lifting, which I think I would have been okay because I knew I had to deal with this like post prep. But I thought it was going to be like, okay, 3-4 months and I'm good. Ended up being like 2 years before just all of a sudden things kind of unlocked. But what kind of kept me in the seat was the fact that, I mean, man, when you think about it, it's like we're all kind of junkies when it comes to like the way this makes us feel. It's like we need our fix. And I would just think about like when the fix was like really good, because you know how it goes, man. A good training day, like, oh man, it makes everything else so much better. Like you get home, your house is on fire, and you're like, I got this. Like I didn't have that. And what kept me in the driver's seat was just that. It's just like, okay, like this has made me feel really good at times. When it's good, it's so good. This is totally worth the wait. And it confirmed things for me that, okay, you must really love this because you're obviously here like bashing your head on the wall for like 2 straight years, just waiting for things to pick up again. And it sounds crazy, I think, to maybe the younger lifters that are like, how can you live like this for like 2 years? Like who would tolerate this? But I think if you do this long enough, I think at the very least, somewhere along the way, you're just going to have maybe a calendar year, a 1-year time span where like things aren't coming together the way you would like. Well, even if they are, like in Brad's case right now, it's like, I still don't want to do this right now, or not as much as I feel like I should. So yeah, 2 years. And then like you, after that prep, I think 2018, I was training 3 days a week. I was doing myo reps on everything. I was more invested in like becoming the first coach. You weren't here yet, Brian, in the Team 3D Muscle Journey staff to squat 500. So I was like, okay, that's a little something. And it was time investment wise, it wasn't too much either. So that kind of held me together a little bit. But I'd say like all the things that relate to specifically what I do, what I want to do, like I was okay with those just being on cruise control. And I guess this brings up the next thing. It's like, okay, so you hinted at this, Brian. Like, what do you do when like you first like find yourself in one of these pickles?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I think when I sort of audit what I enjoy about training, like I think whether it's powerlifting, getting stronger, it's progress. Like it's that's the first thing, is like moving forward in any area of life or any area of training is rewarding. But in those times where things are stale and it's not feeling that way, then there's nothing wrong with sort of leaning on the subjective satisfaction of doing like honest work, like it's getting in there. It's like, consider the alternative of just not training. It's like you'll realize pretty quick that you're better off and happier when you are training, even if your things aren't progressing the way that you wanted. And there's still a lot positive that can go on when you train, like, endorphins. And I mean, you feel better after you train, regardless of if you added 5 pounds to your, to the bar or added an additional rep. And I think that's, in those situations, like I wasn't afraid to go in and just kind of like chase a pump, and realize like, okay, I'm doing enough work where at the minimum I'm able to hold my ground. I'm enjoying the session, and I have faith that like this is something that I can't, like my quality of life is not going to be as good if I leave it out completely, which makes me think like, okay, if I'm going to keep doing this, then eventually things are going to turn around, and they always do when people stick with it. But it's definitely hard. Like I think a lot of people, in my shoes, where, you finish that prep and feel a little bit lost. Like the sort of the easy thing to do sometimes is to pick another event, to work towards. And it doesn't always have to be a meet or a show. Like it can be, just sort of reframing what your short-term goals are. And it doesn't have to be performance related. And I think, the longer you train, one of the advantages of, being a more, advanced training status is like you can do relatively little and still get by and still kind of hold your ground, in terms of muscularity and things like that. So even when things aren't going well, if you're getting in there 2-3 times a week, like you're holding ground, like you're keeping, you're idling, but you're able to accelerate when the time comes. And I think that's what was important for me in that regard. But it can be challenging for sure. It's, and I think once you go through it a couple times, I mean, after, you went through that 2-year stint, I'm sure as things like that come up again, it's easier to, kind of brush it off. And I've told this story before, like when, our first kid was born, when Brewer was born, like I think I took like 6 weeks off of structured training. It's like I was training just out of like habit and feeling bad not training, like I felt lousy when I wasn't training for an extended period of time. So I'd go in there, do a little bit, just get some blood flowing. And I remember at the time feeling very like, apprehensive and feeling almost guilty, like, okay, I'm regressing. And then like once I, slowly ramp back up, once that gauntlet of the first 6 weeks of having a kid is over, once that happened, like things, if anything, I was in a better position to progress at that point. I was able, like my body felt good. I was doing enough to kind of at least maintain, mobility in the movements. But, I think it was like 8 weeks after that, I set a deadlift PR. And so it's one of those things, like once, like now when I go on vacations, for example, like a lot of people will go on vacation, feel like, okay, I need to find a gym. And that's fine if you enjoy it. But like, if you want that week off, if you're craving a week just completely out of the gym, like take it, because you're not going to lose any ground in the long run doing so. And I think just going through that experience once or twice is valuable in itself. So I think that's a good thing for people that haven't experienced that yet is, learn from it when you're in the moment and realize like, okay, this is a valuable experience regardless.
Hey 3DMJers, Andrea Valdez here to tell you all about our new course in the 3DMJ Vault called Calculating Your Calories. This one was made by one of the men you're listening to right now, Alberto Nunez, and he'll be telling you exactly how he sets up nutrition plans for his athletes with every initial onboarding interview. It's a short and sweet delivery of 12 videos giving you Alberto's exact formula, how it changes for the athletes depending on a few key factors, and how he makes adjustments based on the client's goals and seasons. This is our 15th video course in the 3DMJ Vault, and you can become a VIP member to get access to every single one of those courses for just $12.99 per month or $69.99 per year. VIP members will get this Calculating Your Calories course, the lifting library, our contest prep Q&A collection, the sustainable fat loss course, the lagging body parts course, and many, many more. Go to 3dmjvault.com and sign yourself up today. That's 3dmjvault.com to get all access. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the rest of the show.
You know, the last one, the 2018-19, I think what knocked some sense into me was getting it taken away, because 2020, you know how that went. So I was like, okay, well, I really thought it was going to be a month. So I think the first month I'm like, oh, I'm going to geek out and figure out ways to like do it at home. And I'm going to get to test my skill set sort of deal. But I'd say, yeah, somewhere like halfway, it just got to the point where I'm like, I really don't want to do this. I was training like maybe 3 times a week. No, like it took me more than a week to get 3 days in. And it wasn't the most fun. Like it wasn't the lifting that I signed up for initially, like far from it. And then I get my gym back. I got like the worst days because I didn't want to get back into the gym until like just a certain amount of my athletes were able to get into the gym themselves, because I'd feel bad. I feel like if I'm here cheering them on is like, you know, they're doing lateral raises with cans or something. That's like, you can do this, buddy.
No jokes.
You know? I'm gonna head back to the gym. Let me know if you need something, right? Okay, that just didn't feel right. So I went late, and I think we had an hour. It was Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And I still remember that first set of like leg curls. I'm like, oh wow, this is amazing. Like I haven't felt something like this in so long. So ever since then, like that 2018, 2019 slump of sorts, which I think was handled right, like altogether, it hasn't popped back just because I guess I go back to the lockdown. I'm like, anything's better than that. And ever since then, I still have my days in isolation where I'm like, geez, I just, you know, I don't want to train today, but I find myself like I just magically appearing at the gym, like at the same time, like on the days of the week that I have assigned. It's just like magic. Like now it's like, no matter how I feel, it's like I'm there. And once I'm there, I'm like, oh yeah, like let's do this. But yeah, sometimes, you know, to pull back a little bit intentionally, like whether it's taking a week off. I know for me, when I was at my worst in 2018-19, I think I was partly training. And when I said myo reps, it wasn't because like, hey, that's the less effective way of training. It just really cut down my session time. So, you know, I got my squat in. All my bodybuilding work took like 20 minutes. I'm out of there. But yeah, no, I've been good ever since then. And I'm sure like at some point it's going to happen again. And thankfully, you know, like you said, it's like you learn from it. And like I have all these things that I've tried in the past whenever I've had to deal with this. And it's like, okay, like let's see if we can pick up one of those old tools that hopefully we don't have to use too frequently. And maybe you can help us get out of this. Brad, what are you going to do, man? Like, how are you going to help yourself out, man?
Well, you know what? Before I answer that question, Berto, I kind of wanted to piggyback off of what you guys were saying, kind of solutions, because, you know, when we're lucky enough to help somebody through what you guys experience, you know, I've kind of developed this almost like little checklist of things that I do, because I mean that's what we're here for, right? We want to help our folks through the kind of hardships that you went through, and so a lot of times what the first thing I'll do is I'll say, okay, let's talk about the big picture goals. Let's get the big picture goals kind of on paper. And I've got these little tables that I use. And how is today going to fit into this this big picture goal? You know, how is next week and next month going to fit into this big picture goal? And it really kind of helps provide some clarity, so that they know, okay, this day, this week, next month maybe fits into this short-term goal that fits into this long-term goal. And when we kind of identify that and provide it for them visually, it's just a little bit of clarity on why they're doing this today and how it kind of fits into the grand scheme of things. And that was really helpful, like you were saying, Alberto, during the pandemic when everything was on hold. It was just like everything was up in the air. We don't know when things are going to happen. And so, you know, that was really nice when we could kind of say, okay, well, the goal is still the goal. We still know that this is going to happen. It's just probably not going to happen, you know, when we thought. And so we just kind of still just expanded things so that we kind of knew where we were, you know, in this time machine that was kind of going on, right? But then what do you do when there's no goal, right? Because sometimes people are just done. You know, some people are like, you know what? Yeah, that was good. I enjoyed the bodybuilding thing, but you know what? Bucket list is checked off. I ain't going to do it again. You know, what do you do for those people that really don't have a goal, you know? And Brian, you alluded to this earlier. That's when it was kind of like, okay, when we don't have a goal, we just got to create just like the minimalist type program that you just really dig, you know? And sometimes you just got to start pulling information through questions. And usually the first one I always ask is, okay, what is your dream split? Like what do you see out there that is just like really floating your boat? It's really, you know, looks fun. It's turning you on, whatever, right? And maybe we can kind of start incorporating some of that and just, because I know that's what's gotten me through this last 40 weeks. Am I progressing? It's super sporadic, you know? Do I have a long-term goal? I mean, no, I mean, kind of, but not really. It's not really definitive, but I really dig my training. I really like how I set it up. And it goes through these waves of easy weeks and hard weeks. And sometimes I don't get everything checked off. And I'm okay with just, you know what, this week that didn't get checked off and that didn't get checked off. But that's okay. Let's get going with the next week, you know, and that's what's really gotten me through. And so there's your answer right there, Berto. How am I going to help myself? You know, I'm just going to, like I said, ride it out and get to that next week that's kind of the funnest week, you know, the kind of the short week, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, there again, it's like we got to get together something that you really, really enjoy, the include the aspects of it that you really, really dig, and we just got to make them. I call it a minimalist program. It's like the minimum amount that we can do to where we're not backsliding, you know. And so that's kind of my little checklist that I go through when I'm lucky enough to help. Sometimes we're not lucky enough. Some people are like, okay, I'm good. I'm going to take this on my own, you know. I mean, and I'll admit, I've screwed up before. You know, people have come to me and they said, you know what? I don't like my program right now. It's kind of stale, you know. And I'm like, but wait, it's working good, right? Yeah, oh yeah, it's working great, you know. Oh, well, maybe you just shouldn't change anything. Maybe you should just write it out, you know. And then they last 2 more weeks and then I don't see them again. And those are the ones that I really kick myself in the ass, you know. So yeah, to expand on that, Berto, answering your question, I'm going to write it out here for another week or two, you know, finish this hard week up. Get to that first week that is kind of somewhat minimalist. It kind of feels a little bit easy, but it's kind of fun, you know, and I'm able to get all the things checked off usually this week. But then come the second and the third week, if it's still pretty stale, yeah, maybe I need to start going back in the checklist because I've thought about competing. You know, I kind of want to do a powerlifting meet this year. It's been about 3 years, well, almost 4 now since I've competed. And so maybe I do kind of start looking on the horizon now, you know, because I feel like I'm at a point where I could probably run a little preparatory cycle that lasts about 12 or 13 weeks and then hit something November, you know, something like that. So yeah, that's how I'm going to help myself and kind of a little insight on, you know, Coach Brad's checklist of how he helps people through these slumps like this, you know.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that idea of, it's like, what can you assign? You know, like honestly, this goes back. What can you commit to rather? Like a lot of athletes that we get, it's like when you see what they've assigned to themselves. Like sometimes, like they haven't even really hit like a total hot streak. It's like they've been doing this. They for sure love this, but like they've just kind of been, I don't know, all over the place, like the first 5 years of training. And quite often it's no different than what like gym noobs do. Like when they kick it off, it's like, you know what? I'm going to go to the gym 6 days a week. I'm going to completely change my diet. And that usually doesn't last very long, right? But same thing kind of happens to us. Like sometimes you only have so much bandwidth, right? And like Brian said, sometimes there's other things going on in life that has you occupied, and you have to take that into consideration when it comes to your training. But generally speaking, yeah, most people, same thing. Well, Brian said, like I do that with myself sometimes. I'm like, okay, this is the perfect program. We're going to cover everything. When realistically, it's like you can't do that with any single program. You cannot it can't. You can try, but that's not going to go very well. So quite often, like with a lot, especially my Skype consults, like I see what they're doing, and I'm like, all right, because generally they're doing too much because they want it bad, and like we pull back a little bit, and it's like, okay, like this is what you're gonna do. It might look like 60% of what you're doing, but hey, if we stick to this for like 8 months, like it's gonna be probably the best streak you've had until this point. So yeah, quite often for people like us or in similar situations that they've gotten theirs, they've gotten their highs along the way, they've had some good moments, they've accomplished some things. It's I guess it's just so hard to pull back from what like got you there initially, but there's definitely something to, man, I mean, I'd say even like intentionally, like I don't know how I'm gonna feel after this prep, but I think in order to avoid burnout, right, best way to fix the problem is to like avoid it altogether. I think post show I'm gonna, I don't know, like train in a very minimalistic way for like 2-3 months or something, and just like it's like I want to get to it, but no, you said 2-3 months, and just chill out a little bit before I decide to give something as much focus as this prep will require. So downscaling, like what you do, I think the most obvious solution, because I'd say in general most people tend to assign themselves like way too much work, things are just not ready for, and that can be discouraging.
I know for me, like training on the weekends, it makes the split so much better on paper, but it's always a juggling act getting one of those weekend sessions in for me right now. And so just getting to the point where I can accept that maybe I don't train on the weekends anymore, for a bit, and see how that builds like momentum. Because I'm able to accomplish everything during the week. I can sort of, have a 2-day consecutive deload of sorts and hit the ground running the next week. And so, I think that's important. I think that's, like you said, the solution for most people is to probably pull back, make it so you're able to check these goals off consistently, whatever they are. Because I think just the process of leaving things unchecked is kind of what discourages people to begin with in a lot of cases. Yeah.
And, finally getting something done, like sometimes that's a solution. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, hey, I finally lost those 10 pounds I've been wanting to lose now that I'm not speeding, to get there. Same thing with, or I guess another solution that we kind of mentioned was adding the fun factor in there, even if it's like not optimal, maybe so-and-so's never really been good at pull-ups, and they just did their first pull-up, like a few months back. And it's like, okay, how about we just like do pull-ups frequently? Like, so just like throwing those things in, like that's what the squat was for me. Like essentially, like when I was struggling, I was like, okay, well, I don't feel like training, but it's probably the thing I look forward to the most. So let's really center this goal. Like this is going to be what everything revolves around until I feel better, basically. And again, squatting the most weight is like not my ultimate goal, but like, boy, did it get me through. And I think that's something that if I do feel that way again, I'm just, I don't know, going to pick some odd lift, weighted pull up, something, and and just have fun with it.
Yeah, I think that goes back to like just progress in any lift is rewarding. Like I have an athlete right now. She just competed at nationals, and she doesn't intend on competing for the rest of this year. And she hasn't really hit the phase where she's burned out, but I was impressed because proactively she said like I know like this training for these next month or two, like it's not urgent, it's not like it's lower priority training in the grand scheme of things. And so I'd like to incorporate like overhead press, which isn't something like that's a foundation of my powerlifting programs in most cases. But it's like, okay, one of her, bench days we're replacing with OHP. And I think that, and she's already, like she's mentioned, that she's really enjoying it. And, I think when we think about programming, we tend to think about, managing physical fatigue, and you need psychological deloads as well. So I think that's important.
One of the things that I've kind of built into some of my minimalist programs, which is kind of a little bit of a slippery slope, you got to kind of watch for this, but I'll kind of take people that they give me that, okay, this is what I want to do. Like you guys said earlier, it's like, okay, this is what I want to get done. And as you guys found out, sometimes life is just not feasible to do that, to get all of those things checked off, and some, like with me, I'm usually pretty good. If there's 2 things that I don't get checked off, I'm okay with it, because I just make sure that I'm still in those all important ranges that we have on the muscle and strength training pyramids, right? And so if I miss a couple of things, I'm still in the range, or at least I am over time. But I'll say, okay, well, let's take this program and all this stuff that you want to do, and let's just take the cap off of it, and I don't care if it takes you a week. I don't care if it takes you 8 days. I don't care if it takes you 9 days. Get all these things checked off before you go over to your next microcycle, and then of course, we just sometimes have to kind of do a little trial and error. You know what? That took you 12 days. So that didn't work too good. Maybe we need to take this, and this, and this out, and we'll do our little audit, and we'll say, okay, now let's run it again, and then now it's taken them a little bit more reasonable, kind of a time frame. But you're right, Brian. That is a very important aspect of a lot of a lot of athletes, is that they feel that sense of accomplishment, that they got done what it was that was on the piece of paper, and so I'll just kind of through a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes I hit it right off the bat. Sometimes it takes a little while, but just taking these caps off, it sure, maybe we're not getting 6 sessions in a week, but we're getting 6 sessions in 10 days, so then we're averaging 4 sessions a week, and so it kind of is a big relief when people can get things checked off kind of at their own speed, and keep their training going, and that's a lot of times will set them up for success as well. And I know I've done that on occasion. Sometimes it's kind of like when I go through those rough periods, I kind of see my microcycles kind of get stretched out a little bit, and then as soon as I'm back on schedule and I'm past the wife's surprise 50th birthday party, it kind of like that rubber band kind of starts coming back together again, and I'm getting them in a little bit more reasonable time frame. So it's kind of like this little ebb and flow, of things that are happening, and I'm okay with making things last a little bit longer while still getting 95% of the stuff checked off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not wasted work either way. Like it's still
correct,
still effective.
Yeah, and you let them get on that hot streak. Eventually, it's like, okay, they're nailing every week, and yeah, that, like we've discussed, that builds you up, and then eventually you just want more.
Mm-hmm.
And usually it's like I'll hold them back a little bit. I'm like, okay, no, let's make sure this isn't a fluke. Let's get you like really excited to get a little bit closer to what is our normal training. So yeah, when you get to that point where it's like, okay, I've minimized things. I've had 2 good months where everything's been taken care of. I want to do more. I want to do more because at the end, consistency is more than anything what's going to impact like what direction you head in.
Yeah, that hot streak, Berto. That's a good. I just now kind of put that 2 and 2 together. Brad's always a little bit behind on a lot of things, But yeah, hot streak. I like that term. That's probably something I'm going to start using a little bit more often.
Yeah, and you just need one, especially when usually in these situations it's been a while, or you don't see your next one coming up for a minute because you just accomplished said goal, so you're like, oh man, the next one it's gonna be a minute until I feel that way again. This actually reminds me, because Brian, you've kind of done this. I think one thing that we can add to the list of things you can try out, because hockey, your old lover, has kind of reemerged, right?
That's a good point.
Right? So sometimes, like, just doing something different, like, can really, like, help out when it comes to this thing that you really want to do. And that can be many things. Has hockey helped you out?
I wouldn't have thought of that if you wouldn't have mentioned it, but you're right. That actually probably played a big role in that 2018, 2019 timeframe, actually, just kind of bridging that gap and enjoying other forms of physical activity and being able to appreciate them. And, the progress side, like if there's one way to enjoy or make progress, like take a few years off of doing it completely, and then it's like newbie gains all over again. But no, that's been fun. It's been a lot of fun, and I still do that. Once or twice a week. It's good social element to it, obviously, and then that's a really good point. And it's one of those, like, I think really the only other, like, there's pickup basketball. I guess football would be a little bit hard.
Yeah. I would not recommend that one.
There's grown men playing tackle football. That league's got to exist out there somewhere.
But it could be a cooking class. I think anything that you're not so good at is probably a good place to start, because that learning curve is super sharp. So it's like, okay, you come back for your next class and you're like, I'm already like twice as better at understanding what's going on. But also what it does is, I think when you get back to that thing you've kind of been dreading, you learn to appreciate, even though it's slower, how competent you are in that world. Right? It's like, it really puts in perspective. You're like, oh, wow, it's like, I am kind of a stud at this. And, sometimes I forget how much I have accomplished on this side. So for me, like, whenever, I don't know, it could be a cooking class, it could be a dance class. It's like, I do that, I suck at it, and I get back to my lifting, and I'm like, okay, like, now I'm a fish in water again, sort of deal.
That's a really good point. I like that.
I would imagine that's probably kind of how you felt, Bert, when you were doing the jiu-jitsu, huh? When
a little bit.
Guys were twisting you up into a pretzel, and then you go back to the weight room, and I'm like, yes, I'm in my element. I'm a stud again.
Yeah. It made me a lot more open to other things. I think on the openness spectrum, like, I'm just a little bit more open to just most everything. But like that, especially when it comes to like other sports and activities, it's like, oh, okay, well, it's like, this is frustrating, this is hard, but you're making way faster progress than you're going to make in the gym anyways. And it really like when we took that fly fishing course, it's like that dude, me and Brian took a fly fishing course. Like, it's like, this dude is like about it. It's like, for me to be like this guy, like, I'm just going to have to, drive the people around me crazy with like how into it I am. And it kind of reminded me of like us in a way, and like what we do here, like with bodybuilding and powerlifting, where I'm like, wow, like, it just makes you appreciate your craft and how far you've come with it.
Yeah, I think it also made us pretty self-aware at how much we sucked at it. It's like you don't really know, like, if you're not advanced in a particular activity, like, sometimes you can go in a little bit naive. But Berto, you were giving me shit about this the other day at the gym. Like, I won this really nice fly rod like years ago in this raffle.
Oh yeah.
And I'd never really used it. Like, I had never used it. And like, come to find out, it's like this really highly sought after like they don't make it anymore. And this guy was like, where did you get the instructor's like, where did you get this? Like, why do you have this? And Berto said it's like the person at the gym that, you know, starts powerlifting and just immediately buys an SBD belt. just totally ignorant to what they don't know. So yeah, that was a really good comparison. But
he probably thought you could try to buy yourself into being a good
I'm like, it's like I got all the stuff. Why am I only squatting 200 pounds? I got a kick out of that. But that's another thing, you know, I have a, you know, developed interest in is fishing. I think part of that, I mean, just having an activity, you know, if you're a parent, and Brad, I'm sure you can relate to this. It's like, you know, having something you can improve at with your children and kind of grow into with them, I think is really valuable. So, and I think that those are just priorities that shift as you get older. But so I still suck at fly fishing, but gonna get better at it.
But how about
Kelsey
hockey?
bought me a fishing shirt for Father's Day with like a trout on it, and I'm like, I don't know if I've earned this yet. Like, I've caught a few fish, but I don't know if this is like I am that guy with the SBD belt.
It's like your 400. No, we'll say the 400-pound deadlift.
Yeah.
Club shirt.
Yeah, that's right.
So Brian, I'm curious, when you were doing your hockey thing, you mentioned in 2018, 2019, did that kind of motivate you to train a little bit to kind of make you better at hockey in a way?
So it motivated me to try. I just never did it. I thought, it would be really effective. Like, it would take very minimal work, like increase the rep ranges a bit, ride a stationary bike a few times a week. But it's like, I just don't know if I want to do that. You know, it's like that side of it. But it did, like, it crossed my mind. And I think had I like sort of forced myself to do it and noticed the return on that investment, I probably would have. But yeah, it's one of those things like you realize you're out of shape in other ways pretty quickly. Like, we just had like a month where the rink was closed, and a couple nights ago we skated, and like it was exhausting, you know, and it makes you realize even just lifting weights, like I mean, I was gassed, but not as gassed as everybody, you know, most of the other people. It's like, this is at least helping attenuate my decline here. So, no, but I'm not, I haven't trained like hockey specific in quite some time, but, the thought did cross my mind at the time.
Because I have done that before for people, always with the caveat that, you know what, I can get you started, but, you know, I'm not going to be able to maximize your time in that, you know, half marathon that you want to run, or the 10K that you want to run, you know. But if that's the goal, yeah, you know what, we need to kind of shift things around here a little bit and, you know, take some of the volume away from your lower body on your weight training, because we're going to be replacing that with your volume on running and things like that. And I know that, you know, speed in running is equivalent of intensity and load on the bar. And I know the basics, and I kind of get them started, you know, but that'll get people on a little bit of a hot streak, you know, a different way, you know, of kind of incorporating that other activity that you guys kind of mentioned. You know, and I usually feel pretty good because I kept him in the gym, you know. Can you tell I'm a little bit guilty about that guy that like walked away when he was really making the gains, and I didn't I didn't address his concern of freshening up that program, you know. But yeah, I mean, I've done that before with people, you know. Some people, like I got a guy that likes to do the bouldering, you know, the climbing on the wall, and I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you know what, I can help you out a little bit there. You know, you're going to be doing a lot of climbing. Let's cut down on that arm work so your elbows don't get all flared up. We're replacing some of that volume. And again, I did a good job of keeping them in the gym at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think walking them through that too, it sort of, they learn a lot in terms of balancing some of the finer details of their training. They can take that with them. And Berto, like you were in, I don't know if you are at the moment, but like the Peloton, like that's something that like you found rewarding, like with pretty rapid improvement in what you're doing there.
Yeah. Oh, and in endurance, since we're an endurance species, like in 4 weeks, it's crazy how much better you get at it. And that was really cool to see, to the point where I have to cut it off now because I get competitive. Like there's, you're racing against other people, and like I have a bodybuilding prep to take care of, and I'm like here, like, oh no, you're not gonna beat me, dude. Especially if I see that they're older than me. If it's like something about like a 55-year-old endurance athlete, even though he's probably done this forever, it's like, no, I'm chasing you down, bro. But yeah, that's been new and exciting, and like I look forward to being able to do that again, because yeah, like once I got that going, like it was amazing. And actually, this plays off to something that I want to mention, because you guys do a good job of this because you guys have to and are blessed in that way. But that is the whole, I said this years ago, Steve, square me, bro. Diversifying your happiness portfolio is important, because, if you have all these things in your life that you can derive joy from, it's like when one isn't clicking the way you like, it's like, okay, well, this gives me a chance to focus more so on my family, on, hey, let me play around with some programming and create some templates that will be very useful, like, to me in the future. So that's something that I think you should have concurrently running alongside your training all the time, if it's not something that just like organically makes its way into your life.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, Bert, because my love of spreadsheets sometimes brings out the real inner nerd in me, because I'll get a little inspiration or something that I've read, or I'll hear Brian make a quote, on some podcast, and it'll kind of turn on a little light bulb. I'm like, ooh, what if I did that, and then I'll start making a spreadsheet, and something I can kind of run as a guinea pig on myself, which is actually something that's gotten me through dry spells in the past, is I'll get inspiration, I'll put it down on a spreadsheet, and I'll kind of play with it. And then, one of two things happens. Either I really like it and I run it for a while, like I'm doing this one right now, or I'll run it for about a month, 6 weeks, and I'm like, this thing sucks, and at least I know then I'm not using this on any of our clients.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. I never really thought about, because sometimes I do get some inspiration and I start nerding out on my Excel.
Yeah. I think too, as coaches, we're in a good position to get satisfaction out of progress that other people are having too. I think that's something. If your training's not going well, like if you're doing your own programming, Brad, like I think all three of us do, it's sometimes you can start to second guess, like if your training's not going well, like, oh, what should I tweak here? And you kind of take the seat of being a coach again, and you realize, like, okay, I need to stay put, or how would I manage this if I were my own athlete and I was paying myself. But I think too, just seeing other people make progress, and playing a role in helping them, direct their path is super rewarding too. And I think that's, as Berto said, that's one of the areas of enjoyment for me is just helping other people make gains when I'm not.
Living vicariously through them, right?
We got about 3 pounds of muscle left between the three of us to gain.
Yeah, so. If we're lucky, and I think 2.5 of it is between the two younger guys. So.
We'll be seeking out cholesterol PRs here soon. Bragging about our HDL. I do think about sometimes though, like, I mean, we're approaching middle age. It's like you're still setting your, like, it's hard when you first start training, like when you're in your teens or in your 20s, thinking about like, okay, when I'm elderly, am I going to wish that I, like, that's not a motivation for you at that point. But like, it's starting to become that. It's like, okay, well, I'm investing in my health as a, you know, senior citizen. Like, it sounds ridiculous, but like, it's kind of true. It's like you're going to be much better off with, you know, even if you're not setting PRs on squat, bench, and deadlift. Like, that's another way to think about it. Like, if you're focused on the big picture, just overall health rather than progress, like, there's a lot to be had there. And yeah, it's a sarcopenic 401k kind of.
Yeah, and well, here's the deal. It's like, I think when you make it to this stage where you will, it's unavoidable. You will hit a slump. Like, we forget that, you know, even when you're cruising and you don't feel like you have that killer instinct, like, you're still going so much harder than you think. You know, like, it's still contributing to something. I just remember seeing videos of, like, you know, I went back to pull some footage from, like, that stint where I was not training with the most of motivation. I'm like, wow, you were still going hard, because at the end, that's kind of all you know. And that's going to be the case for most folks, like the folks who do fall into these slumps. Is that, hey, even if you're cruising, you're doing so much more than you probably suspect you are.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know that's one thing that I really take pride in, is that and one thing that keeps me going too, because like I told you guys earlier, I mean, am I going to compete anytime soon in bodybuilding? Probably not. You know, if it's 2023, I'll be lucky. You know, am I going to do a meet? Well, maybe by the end of this year. So that's kind of like, well, what's gotten me through this last 40 weeks? You know, and one of the things that I take a lot of pride in is I went back to Tennessee, and we're working on a family heirloom. We call it Hoopy. It's a 55 Chevy pickup, and we're totally doing a frame off restoration on it. And so we're back there for like 8 days, and I'm like, okay, if I get to the gym one time, I'll be happy. I'll get to the gym, and I just want to do my 3 lifts. I want to do my squat, my bench, and my deadlift, you know. And so here's this 50-year-old guy with all this gray in the side of his hair that just walks into this gym. I got no belt. I'm just squatting barefooted basically in this cage, and I can work up to, you know, 6 plates total, 3 on each side, 315 pounds, and I'm doing, you know, 4 triples with that. And I'm looking around, and to me, that's, you know, that's kind of, it's like 70% of what I can do, but I'm looking around and ain't nobody else doing that. You know, there's the guy over there with the SBD belt on, and he's got the you know, Nike platform shoes, and he's got his fancy, you know, shirt and everything, and he ain't doing that, you know. And I wander over to the deadlift platform, and I throw on 405, you know, and I'm doing that for 3 or 4 reps, no straps, just barefoot, you know, no belt, no knee sleeves, no nothing. I don't see a whole lot of people doing that, you know, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like, you know, I want to keep doing that. I want to keep taking pride in that, and knowing that I could just go to some gym somewhere, and this 50-year-old guy with gray in his beard and on the side of his face can actually do something that looks pretty respectable, you know? And you know, that's something that I take a lot of pride on. That's something that keeps me going, you know, really, to be honest with you, is if we don't use it, we're going to lose it, you know, and we got to know what the minimalist amount is that we need to do in order to keep that. And you know what? I'm okay with that, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's good to reflect on what you have done sometimes, you know, because it really puts you in perspective. Like, I think about, like, what would my life be without lifting? And it's kind of weird to think about, you know, and you know, yeah, like Brian said, it's like, you know, people might not be thinking about this just yet, but geez, like, this is probably one of the best investments I've made. So yeah. So yeah, I don't care how motivated I am. Like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know, 10 years from now, maybe this just becomes exercise to me, but it's like, I'm gonna keep doing it because it's absolutely worth it, and all the troubles that do come along with it.
Yeah, I guess to kind of tie what you both said together, it's like, for me, it's okay if there's periods of time where it does subjectively just feel like exercise, because you're still, like you said, Berto, you're still training pretty damn hard, like, in comparison. So it's all relative. And I think, Yeah, people will be all right. I think it's expected. I think if you can plan for it, like know that it's probably inevitably going to happen a handful of times across your training career, then when it does occur, you're not going to panic. You're not going to feel like you need to pick a new hobby or anything like that. It's just something you just have to ride out a little bit.
Yeah. No, it's important we normalize this because, you check out your Instagram feed and it's like, it's all these really motivated people, it seems that way, who appear to never have bad days or they're very seldom when, in fact, we all know that like that's not actually how this thing works. So yeah, I think I'm glad we had this chat because it happens a lot more frequently than people know. I know a lot of folks who, hey, it's like they're pretty embedded in the fitness industry, and like even for them, and it's extra hard for them because at the same time, it's like they have to produce content and have a smile on their face. But like even them, man, like it's in some stud athletes that I've worked with, and shoot, some of them have even had periods of time where it's like, Jeff was one actually. He was playing more tennis than bodybuilding for a while, and he's doing okay. So yeah.
Well,
no.
This kind of happens to all athletes too. Like if you really think about high level athletes, and that's the thing too about the comparison with Instagram. And a lot of times, who are we comparing ourselves to? Well, it's those guys that are busting their ass to get a little bit leaner on the stage, to get a little bit more on the platform. And I one of the things that I love watching is documentaries on athletes, just because I just love athletics. And you how do you say Usain Bolt? The sprinter. He went through a stint where he was like for 16, 18 months, he didn't want to train. He was done because he was working so hard for like 0.2 of a second, on his time. And he just was partying for like 18 months, and you got to kind of realize when you're comparing yourself to that elite athlete on Instagram, NFL players, they get burned out because they are pushing really, really hard to sustain their performance in that sport. And it's a lot more than a lot of us are able to do when we've got families and jobs. And, it's hard. It's hard. And there's a reason why it's kind of a short-lived thing. So we just have to kind of know that when it's time to not push that hard and not push that envelope, that you can still partake in your sport and just, I'm sure that NFL players, they still play football a little bit on the recreation, a little flag here and flag there, and they're still in good shape and they're still strong and they're still pushing some good weight, and I'm sure Usain Bolt, Usain, or I always screw his name up. He can still probably run pretty fast, it's just that he's not pushing to that level that he was when he was, the elite, the top of the elite, but it doesn't mean that he's totally given it up either, or it's not any part of a resemblance of who he is or his life.
All right, let's close the deal. Who wants to close this one?
I feel like I closed, so I'm good.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to add. I mean, I think you guys brought up some good points that I hadn't thought of on my end. Good reminders. So yeah, I think we put a bow on it.
Yeah, I think the main message here is like, hey, let's normalize this a little bit. Especially in a sport like this, we talk about the longevity, right? You can do this for a long time. It's just bound to happen. So it's normal, and we've all gone through it, and we're probably going to go through it again. If you haven't gone through yours, at some point it's going to happen. And hopefully, yeah, you might be going through one right now. If that's you, like it's going to get better, and hopefully some of the tips we dispense here today can help someone shorten up this very difficult period, but at the same time, like it is fruitful in that there's lessons to be learned there.
What's going on, 3DMJers? Eric Helms here. Thanks for listening to our podcast. I just want to take a second to tell you about MASS, Monthly Applications in Strength Sport. This is a monthly research review that I put out with Greg Nuckols, Dr. Mike Zerdos, and Dr. Eric Trexler. We cover the most up-to-date, peer-reviewed research in the world of strength and physique sport that's directly relevant to your practice as a coach or athlete. We provide our reviews in written format, but also, since you enjoy our podcast, audio roundtable reviews where we discuss the research in depth. Finally, we also do video concept reviews where we cover a broader topic in video format for your learning. For fitness professionals, you can take quizzes on mass content and earn continuing education credits in most of the biggest certifying bodies in the fitness industry. If you want to sign up and get a subscription, head over to 3dmusclejourney.com and click on the Products tab. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.